The femme fatale. She's got a secret. She's got a past. And she's out for one thing.
They hang you for a thing like that.
She's the beautiful and seductive woman luring some desperate man to his destruction. Among some of the greatest, there's Phyllis Dietrichson, played by Barbara Stanwyck in Double Indemnity, Jane Greer's Kathy Moffat in Out of the Past, and Savage's Vera in Detour. When socialite Ellen Barrett and author Richard Harlan meet on a train to New Mexico, Ellen is immediately intrigued.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was staring at you, wasn't I? I didn't mean to, really. It's only because you look so much like my father.
He looks a lot like her father.
I noticed it the minute I saw him in the club car. His face, his voice, his manner. It's uncanny.
And Richard is obviously intrigued by this beautiful woman who can't keep her eyes off of him. Ellen and her mother and her sister have come out west from Boston to spread the ashes of her father. And I can't stress this enough. Ellen really loved her father. Really loved him. Ellen and Richard quickly fall in love. Very quickly. And within a matter of days, Ellen proposes marriage.
Will you marry me?
After she gives her current fiancé, lawyer Russell Quinton, the brush off.
I'm in love. We intend to get married at once. Tomorrow.
Ellen and Richard marry and everything seems perfect. Except Ellen doesn't want to share Richard with anyone. She is pathologically and murderously possessive.
I don't want anybody else but me to do anything for you.
Richard is hers, and anyone who shows him any attention or affection will feel Ellen's wrath. That includes her mother, her sister, Richard's younger brother Danny, who is recovering from polio, and her own unborn child.
Look at me. I hate the little beast. I wish it would die.
Much of this film plays like a romantic and marital melodrama, and that was the genre the film's director, John Stahl, excelled at. He spent much of the 1930s crafting some of the best melodramas of the era. Backstreet, Imitation of Life, and Magnificent Obsession. But Leave Her to Heaven was something different. A film with very dark themes set in brilliant daylight. Its scenes are sun-drenched, wide-open natural environments, and in bright and well-appointed spaces. It's important to note that in the 1940s, very few Technicolor films had a contemporary setting. Technicolor was reserved for musicals, adventure, fantasy, and historical films. Realistic dramas were not filmed in color. In fact, the president of Technicolor Corporation even went so far as to say if a story has been conceived, planned, and written for black and white, it should not be done in color. The film is beautiful, and it's jarring when things begin to take a dark turn. And while the iconic noir imagery of shadows and black and white and high contrast lighting are missing, Leave Her to Heaven sets a definite noir mood with its undercurrent of discomfort and unease and paranoia. And when viewed alongside a film like 1945's Mildred Pierce, another female-centered noir, Leave Her to Heaven, like Mildred, it's a noirish thriller that's masquerading as a marital melodrama. And really, up to a certain point, Ellen is a sympathetic character. She wants to spend time with her new husband, and people keep intruding.
Do you know, ever since we've been married, we've never been alone, not for a single day.
Her brother-in-law.
Hi, Dick.
Hey, good morning, Danny.
Morning, Ellen. Hi, Danny.
Her mother, her sister, and she's jealous. She has a jealous streak. I mean, that's an understatement. But her casual cruelty when dismissing her fiancé for Richard, and the unspoken resentment and anger she directs towards her mother.
Father and I used to come here every spring, year after year. And occasionally Ruth came along, but never Mother.
Well, those are all red flags. And then Ellen lets her mask slip.
And I'm just as happy as he is that Danny's doing so well. But after all, he's a cripple.
And she reveals her true self for the first time.
I want you to tell my husband that it would be better for Danny to stay here at Warm Springs.
That isn't true.
And we see that Ellen has been playing a role to hide her pathological inner wants and needs, which are obviously selfish and self-serving. And in this film, everything is too perfect and composed. The setting, the interiors, the color schemes, the clothing, and especially Ellen. And this is where the Technicolor pays off. Richard is sucked in by her beauty and perfection, and he falls for the act, because all that beauty in the surroundings and in the warm colors of the domestic spaces and in the innocent pinks and yellows and the calming shades of greens and blues that enhance and play up Ellen's eyes are deceptive. The perfection becomes overwhelming and unrelenting, and it goes from enviable to disturbing. This is a dark, cold-blooded story, and when Danny gets in the way, her facade of the loving sister-in-law breaks. And when her own unborn child gets in the way, well... And when she suspects her sister of stealing her husband's affections...
And the state will prove that the defendant, Ruth Barrett, deliberately and maliciously plotted and carried through the murder.
And all of this is really subversive. Ellen's maniacal enthusiasm for housekeeping and being the perfect and dangerously devoted wife to her husband turns the post-war domestic ideal into a nightmare. And Jean Tierney is perfect as Ellen. She exudes an aristocratic coldness and remoteness. Her intense green eyes glow in Technicolor and can flare with emotion or go dead when she's committing the most heinous of crimes. There is some debate as to whether Ellen is an actual femme fatale or if the film itself is even a film noir. Critics argue that Ellen does not seduce Richard into acting against his interest or breaking the law, so she's not really a femme fatale. But she does seduce him into ignoring about a dozen red flags, and that leads to tragedy for Richard and everyone he cares about. I don't see how you can deny Ellen the title of femme fatale.
What's wrong with Ellen?
There's nothing wrong with Ellen. It's just that she loves too much.
"35 minutes into 1945's Detour, Al Roberts, played by Tom Neal, pulls into a rural desert gas station and he spots this woman thumbing it on the side of the road. From far away, you get a sense that she's pretty down on her luck. And as we get closer, we see that she's about as far down as you can go. Up until this point in the film, we've been following Al as he makes his way from New York to Los Angeles to reunite with his girlfriend Sue. Sue left Al in the Big Apple, and like so many other kind of pretty blonde girls, she headed west.
I want to try my luck in Hollywood.
On his cross-country trek, he's picked up by Charles Haskell, who shares some pearls of wisdom and personal information.
After all, what kind of dame some rides? If you want to see a real scar, brother, get a load of this. That was 15, 16 years ago. I haven't been home since.
During the drive, Haskell falls asleep, and he never wakes up. And here is where Al makes the first in a series of terrible decisions. With Charles Haskell dead on the side of the road, Al decides what would be best in the situation is to hide the body, take the car, and assume Charles's identity. In Al's mind, it'll all be over once he reaches Los Angeles. He'll dump the car somewhere on the side of the road and reunite with Sue, and then resume being Al Roberts. It's not the best idea, but I guess if you play your cards right, Al, it could come off without a hitch. But then he decides to give this woman a ride. And right then, fate, bad luck, and terrible choices all combine to create a hurricane of a downward spiral. Because what Al doesn't know is that he's picked up a rattlesnake named Vera. Played by Anne Savage, Vera is the nastiest and most vicious woman in film noir. Detour is a story full of dark coincidences, with the overall message being that you have no control when the hands of fate swing against you. And once Al picks Vera up, he's doomed, because Vera knows Al is not Charles Haskell.
It just so happens I rode with Charlie Haskell all the way from Louisiana.
After all, what kind of dame some rides?
Vera instantly sizes Al up, and in her eyes, he's stupid and he's weak. And that gives her the upper hand.
Not only don't you have any scruples, you don't have any brains. You got all the earmarks of a cheap crook. Why, you dope.
She's volatile. She's desperate. She's the definition of hard-boiled.
I don't like you, but just remember who's boss around here.
Actresses in 1945 just did not look or sound that way in American film.
Life can be wonderful.
Eddie Muller, writing in Dark City Dame, says, urged on by Edgar Ulmer, Anne Savage transformed herself into the harpy from hell. Cold cream soiled her usual upswept hairdo, giving her the unwashed, downtrodden look of a fallen woman.
I came in for makeup. I went to the hairdresser, and she gave me a lovely, nice, beautiful, clean hairdo. And then we all drove to Palmdale. Edgar came over to look at my makeup and my hairdo, and I looked too nice, and he said, this will never do, because Anne has to look like Vera, which has to look like she just came off the dirtiest freight train.
No major studio would have allowed a star to be presented the way Ulmer showed Savage in Detour. The stringy hair, the dirty face, the nails-on slate voice. That kind of verite exceeded the comfort level of the average casting director and several not-so-average producers and directors. Compared to other classic femme fatales, she's unglamorous, she's unsophisticated, and besides greed and personal gain, she's also motivated by a combination of survival instinct and desperation.
That dirty crook.
Vera, more than anything else, is the catalyst for Al's detour. His goals were simple. Sure, he was in a tight spot, but all he had to do was get to LA and leave the car. He wasn't trying to do anything more than he's already done. Vera has other ideas. First, she demands Haskell's money.
Let's see that roll. That all Haskell had?
Isn't it enough?
No, I thought he had more.
Then that they sell Haskell's car.
Well, I'm going to see that you sell this car so you don't get caught.
You wouldn't want a small percentage of the profits.
Well, now that you insist, how can I refuse?
And that's fine with Al, because then they can go their separate ways. He wants to get away from this woman as fast as possible.
From now on, you and I are like the Siamese twins.
She's aggressive. She's abrasive. I mean, she does have some very brief moments where she displays some vulnerability.
I'm first in the bathtub. If I didn't want to give you a drink, I wouldn't have offered it.
But when her vulnerability is ignored or her overtures are rebuffed, it's quickly dismissed and replaced with aggression and bitter anger.
Anyway, if I find you gone in the morning, I'll notify the police.
And Vera is implied to have consumption or tuberculosis.
You got a mean cough. Want to do something about it.
I'll be all right.
That's what Camille said.
And the attraction, repulsion, and dance around doom between Al and Vera is amplified by the fact that Vera is running out of time.
Plenty of people dying this minute. I would give anything to trade places with you. I know what I'm talking about.
And perhaps this fact fuels her fever dream of a big scheme.
We're not selling the car.
Well, wait a minute, Miss Haskell.
Come on, darling.
They know they can get around $1,800 for the car. They can split the money and probably get away clean. But for Vera, that's not enough. When she finds out that Charles Haskell Sr. is on his deathbed, she thinks it would be a great idea for Al to pretend to be Charles Haskell Jr. and claim his inheritance.
Yes.
No, I won't do it.
Yes, you will.
You think I'm crazy? It's impossible, I tell you.
It's an absolutely outrageous scheme. And a kind of madness takes hold of her. She insists they could be rich, they could pull it off.
You'll be fixed for the rest of your life as Charlie Haskell. You can take your inheritance and go away. No more worrying about the rent, no sweating, scheming, wondering where your next meal's coming from. Think about that, Roberts.
Vera, please, you're talking too loud.
I had never had a good part like that.
Merle, it's Terry.
Terry, darling. Oh, it's so wonderful to hear your voice. Are you all right?
I had played, the other woman in other films, but never anything like Vera.
There's a cute little gas chamber waiting for you, Roberts. And I hear extradition to Arizona's a cinch. Where's that phone?
She is mean to a certain extent. She wants to be boss.
If you shut up and don't give me any arguments, you'll have nothing to worry about.
She was a real bitch.
Don't you realize if I'm caught, they'll want to know where I got the car and stuff, and they'll have me on a murder charge.
If you're smart, you won't get caught.
And the intense relationship between Al and Vera reaches its breaking point.
I'm tired of this game. Let's have some blackjack.
play solitaire.
They go at each other, their words firing like bullets from a machine gun.
I would rather call the cops and told him you killed a man and stole his
didn't
money.
kill anybody.
Yes, you did.
Vera swings from self-pitying to fierce and calculating.
You hurt me.
I'm sorry, but
And it's hot in here. Open up a window.
And when she finally has had enough, and she calls Al's bluff, she meets her end in a most dramatic way. Anne Savage's performance is remarkable, and her demise is shocking, and a culmination of the toxic relationship between her and Al. Now, to be fair, Al is an unreliable narrator, and the entire story is a flashback told through his point of view, which, if one decides to be charitable to Vera, could see her behavior as an exaggeration on Al's part. But even if it is, Vera, as portrayed by Anne Savage, still remains one of the most gloriously vicious women in film noir.
After all, what kind of dame some rides?
"1946's Gilda" features Rita Hayworth in the title role as the enigmatic and alluring woman with a past. Directed by Charles Vidor and set against a backdrop of espionage and intrigue in post-war Argentina, Gilda is a story of passion, obsession, and the dangerous line between love and hate.
I'll get it.
Played by Rita Hayworth, Gilda is a woman whose beauty is both a blessing and a curse. And there is a sense that she has a past, and in that past, she's used her beauty and sexuality to survive. Initially defined by her relationships with two men,
This is Johnny Farrell. Johnny, this is Gilda. Gilda is my wife, Johnny.
both men attempt to pin her down and refuse to see or acknowledge her as a complex woman with deep emotional needs and a very strong independent streak. She manages to defy them in her own way, and one iconic scene, is representative of that defiance. And it's a scene that made Rita Hayworth a superstar. But in the context of the film and the character, this scene is an important moment. Besides being a show-stopping, scorching hot musical number, it symbolizes Gilda's defiance of a world where the men around her wield all the power and control. She sings, "Put the blame on Mame."
Boy, put the blame on Mame.
A song about a woman, Mame, whose sexuality carries such power it causes chaos and catastrophe. Her kiss ignites the Great Chicago Fire. Her dancing sets off the apocalyptic 1906 San Francisco earthquake.
One night she started to shim and shake. That brought on the Frisco quakes.
In the number, Hayworth is costumed in a black satin strapless dress and long gloves, designed by Jean-Louis. She mesmerizes everyone. She is in control of the room, but most importantly, she is in control of the men. You believe that she could, with the flick of her hair, trigger an earthquake or an avalanche. For the rest of her life, Hayworth would say that when men met her, they always expected her to be Gilda. She wasn't Gilda. But it's a testament to her for bringing this character so completely to life that men believe she actually existed.
Put the blame on Mame, boys. Put the blame on Mame.
Kathy Moffat. She's one of the best of the worst. She's a liar, she's a thief, and she's a murderer. And she's one of my favorite femme fatales.
You didn't have to kill him.
Yes, I did. You wouldn't have killed him.
And Kathy takes center stage in 1947's Out of the Past. She's beautiful, and she is oh so very, very complicated. Produced by RKO and directed by Jacques Tourneur, 1947's Out of the Past stars Robert Mitchum as Jeff Bailey. a former private investigator who has tried to leave his shady past behind and start a new life in a small California town. He's got a good gig and a nice girl, Anne, but he's also got a secret. And the past he is running from catches up to him when an old associate, Joe Stefanos, discovers him completely by chance.
That Bailey who burns you up, he run the gas station?
You know him?
I might have, once.
Stefano works for Kirk Douglas's Whit Sterling, a wealthy gambler and slick operator, and Sterling has been looking for Jeff for a while.
Same guy. Time-proof, weatherproof.
But this part of the story is told in flashback. Jeff is telling Anne about his past. 3 years ago, Sterling needed a detective to find his missing girlfriend, Kathy. You see, Kathy shot him 4 times and took off.
With $40,000.
I want her back.
All the money?
Just want her back.
So we hear about Kathy before we ever see her.
Kathy Moffat.
When Kathy first appears on screen, we see Kathy how Jeff remembers her.
Then I saw her, coming out of the sun.
She's cool, she's reserved, and she's beautiful, with big round eyes and a sly smile. Jeff falls for her. And from the beginning, she twists the truth.
There was a little business about $40,000.
I didn't take it.
Did you know it was
She's
taken?
dangerous, and she never lies about that.
I'm sorry he didn't die.
But she also never talks about her past, and she remains a mystery. And we really don't know what she wants beyond self-preservation, and she swears she didn't take that $40,000. Instead of returning her to Whit, the two run off together, and they hide in San Francisco. But they aren't as smart as they think they are. And when they're discovered and confronted by Jeff's former PI partner, Jack Fisher, a dark and perverse side of Kathy that obviously has always lurked under that beautiful facade resurfaces.
Why don't you break his head, Jeff?
The look on her face here is one of intoxication and thrill. She's excited by the violence, and we are genuinely surprised as Jeff, because this isn't the same woman who was frolicking in the moonlight in Acapulco. Then, despite all her talk of love, she splits, leaving Jeff to clean up her mess and discover the truth.
But I didn't take his money.
Molly Haskell called Kathy Moffat one of the most unforgettably rotten women in the movies, and she is. The question is, what does Kathy want? Phyllis Dietrichson wants to kill her husband and collect on his insurance. Vera wants to swindle a dying rich man by having Al Roberts pretend to be the man's dead son. Ellen Barrett, she just loves too much, and she wants her husband's absolute and undivided attention. Kathy has no long game or master plan. Her maid, played by the great and insanely underused Teresa Harris, tells us,
You work for Catherine Moffat?
Not anymore. She's gone. She got pushed around.
which gives us some clues into Kathy's relationship with Whit.
You dirty little phony.
She just acts in the heat of the moment. It's action, reaction, lies, and self-preservation.
You're like a leaf that the wind blows from one gutter to another. Can't help anything you do, even murder.
Eddie Muller, writing in the book Dark City Dames, notes that Jacques Tourneur understood that any mystery story with a woman at the core was ultimately a story about the mystery of women, about the unfathomable depths beneath their placid surface, and about man's uncontrollable urge to dive in. Passivity allowed the male viewer to project his fantasies and desires on a stunning, tough, seemingly soulless woman. And although Jeff and Whit are antagonists, this is not the story of two men battling each other. This is a story of a woman manipulating two men. There's always a sense that she has more information than everyone else. She's the ultimate force pulling the strings.
Jacques Tourneur, at that time, didn't speak English very well. And he, in speaking of the part, he said to me, "Do you know the word impassive?" And I said, "Yes, I know that word." He says, "That's what I want, impassive." I said, "Yes, I know, I can do that." He said, "First half, good girl. Last half, bad girl." That's all I needed to know.
So now that Whit's found Jeff, he's got another job for him. Jeff thinks he's under no obligation to do anything for Whit because Whit has no clue about his relationship with Kathy. I mean, who would have told him?
You remember Kathy, don't you?
Yeah, I remember Kathy.
She shot this man 4 times and stole his money. She didn't have to go back. She had the $40,000. Kathy, what are you doing? And why are you doing it?
You see, Jeff, you owe me something. You'll never be happy until you square yourself.
When Jeff heads to San Francisco, he's told to meet up with Amita Carson, secretary to Leonard Eels, the man who is the source of Whit's tax problem. Jeff's no dummy. He knows it's a frame-up.
You worried about something?
I don't know, should I be?
Not if you do what you're told.
And as far as Jeff is concerned, Mita and Whit are 2 of the principals in this deadly game.
Am I being brought up here to leave my fingerprints around? On the other hand, maybe it does. You know, it could be that I'm the patsy and you're on the spot.
So imagine his surprise when you-know-who shows up dressed in black and up to no good.
Mr. Tillotson, this is Mr. Eel's secretary. I'm worried about Mr. Eel.
She's in on it, too. Boy, does she lie.
Better slip up, baby.
She's so good at it.
Did you by any chance send your friend up there to find Eels dead?
No, Jeff.
They told you they were going to knock him off, and they haven't done it, have they? They haven't because I tipped him off. He blew.
He's all right?
Didn't you want him to be?
Yes. Yes, because if he dies, they'll say you did it.
Ma'am, you just tried to frame him for murder.
And you did tell him about Fisher. When you told him I did. Perfect.
Kathy becomes 100% committed to whatever scheme she's in on at the time until it's not working for her. Then she moves to push the odds in her favor.
Put in a call for Whit Sterling,
Now,
please.
sit down. We better keep Whit out of this.
He's right, Kathy.
5 minutes later,
That's right. Whit Sterling's at the Blue Sky Club in Reno. Shut the door.
throughout the film, Tenor drops visual clues about Kathy's true nature through her wardrobe. It goes from bright white and light colors into darker colors and shades of gray and into black. Her final outfit has her looking like a holy sister in service of the dark arts.
She can't be all bad. No one is.
And we know that. We've seen another side of her in Acapulco and San Francisco. But how much of that is real? She can't be all bad, but she's bad enough. I think she loves Jeff in her own way, but her way is no good. She's not 100% committed, because at the end of the day, she's only looking out for herself and her own best interest.
Go on, Kathy. Tell him about Joe.
I didn't send him after Jeff. It was his own idea.
And just so we know how bad Kathy is, she stands in stark contrast to Anne, the small-town good girl that Jeff falls for after he begins his new life. Anne is open and earnest, and above all, she trusts him. She trusts his word. She loves him. Does he still love Kathy? And if he does, how much?
Be very sure that there isn't even a little bit of love left for her.
Kathy's complexity makes her such a compelling character. She leaves you with 1,000 questions. How much of her was that girl in Acapulco? Were Jeff's memories of Kathy completely unreliable?
I never told you I was anything but what I am. We just wanted to imagine I was.
Norma Desmond is a complex character, a faded star whose once great career has been relegated to obscurity. She is deeply delusional, believing that her past fame and talent is still relevant, despite the fact that the world has moved on. At the beginning of the film, Norma is introduced as someone who is desperate to make a comeback.
Why do they beg me for my photographs? Why? Because they want to see me, Norma Desmond.
She's convinced the world is waiting for her return. She's deeply flawed, but also very sympathetic in some ways. She's been abandoned by the industry that made her famous, and she's unable to accept that she's no longer the young and beautiful starlet.
She must be 1,000,000 years old.
She surrounds herself with reminders of her past glory, including photographs of herself. We're talking lots and lots of photographs of herself. She lives cocooned in the past in a decaying mansion filled with relics. I mean, an interior designer hasn't touched the place since probably 1927. And she's disdainful of the modern era, especially the modern movie industry, which for her peaked during the silent era.
They took the idols and smashed them. The Fairbankses, the Gilberts, the Valentinos.
We didn't need dialogue. We had faces.
Talk, talk, talk.
But Norma is also a manipulator, and she's controlling. When she hires Joe Gillis to help her write her script, she believes this will be her ticket back to fame. And Joe underestimates Norma because he thinks he's using her.
I felt kind of pleased with the way I'd handled the situation.
But she uses her wealth and power to control him and keep him in her orbit. As the film progresses, Norma's mental state deteriorates. She becomes increasingly erratic and paranoid, convinced that everyone is out together, and she is ultimately driven to murder. Culminating in the film's famous final scene. Norma's decline is terrifying, but it's also heartbreaking. And Swanson's performance is the perfect balance of melodrama and realism. However, the impact of Sunset Boulevard went beyond the film. Gloria was just too good. The role blurred the lines between the actress and the character she played, forever linking Gloria Swanson with the tragic figure of Norma Desmond. The degree of identification that audiences made between the character and the actress was aided by the screenplay, which was a clever blend of reality and fiction, using real-life Hollywood locations like Schwab's drugstore and filming on the Paramount lot and on Paramount sound stages, and also using images and references drawn from Swanson's own professional life. And then layered on top of that was Wilder's use of Swanson's own films as Norma Desmond's. This one, Queen Kelly, was in fact directed by Erich von Stroheim, who plays Max the Butler, the one-time director/husband of Norma Desmond. Swanson herself was a huge star at Paramount, and when she says this,
Tell him without me, he wouldn't have any job, because without me, there wouldn't be any Paramount studio.
You're right, Miss Desmond.
that is also true. Her films with Cecil B. DeMille were wildly successful. And her history with the director is something that is shared with Norma.
Hello, young fella.
Hello, Mr. DeMille.
But Gloria Swanson was not Norma Desmond. And it's a testament to her skill as an actress, as a great actress, that sometimes it becomes hard to separate the woman from the fiction. Released in 1950, Gun Crazy is a propulsive, energetic, unrelenting force of a film. Directed by Joseph Lewis and starring John Dahl and Peggy Cummins, Gun Crazy is simultaneously of its time and ahead of its time. A film where the direction and acting feels free and untethered to anything else that was coming out of Hollywood at the time. Made outside of the studio system, the film was produced by the King brothers. The screenplay was written by McKinley Cantor and blacklisted writer Dalton Trumbo, writing under the front of Millard Kaufman. This is a story of dizzying, crazy love and obsession that so intricately links sex and violence that as soon as Laurie and Bart hook up, we know that the two have nowhere else to end this story but the grave. Gun Crazy opens with Bart as a young boy. He's fascinated by guns. He loves to shoot them. He loves to show them off. And he even steals one. And as a result, he is sent to reform school.
We're not trying you here today because you like to shoot, Bart. We're trying you because the thing you like so well has turned into a dangerous mania with you.
Flash forward to the present day, and Bart's back from the reformatory and a stint in the army where he taught marksmanship. And Bart's got an idea, and it's a good idea.
I don't know, I think I'd kind of like to settle down. Maybe get a job with Remington or one of those outfits demonstrating.
Hey! But his first night back, Bart and his friends decide to go to a carnival, and that's where he meets
The dangerous, the beautiful Miss Sandy Laurie Starr.
well, match, meet gasoline. And the idea of that nice, stable job with Remington goes right out of the window. He joins the carnival as a trick shooter, and he and Laurie fall in love. They get fired from the carnival because, hey guys, you can't shoot at your boss. And Laurie, who needs lots of action and lots of money, and whose only desire is to live it up, convinces Bart to join her in a series of robberies.
Bart, I want things, a lot of things, big things. I don't want to be afraid of life or anything else. I want a guy with spirit and guts.
The first robbery they commit is relatively harmless. I mean, it's still a robbery, but compared to what comes later, it's child's play. But as they become more reckless, the stakes get higher.
I want action.
Even though Bart knows everything about the two of them is wrong.
It's just that everything's going so fast. It's all in such high gear.
Action.
Bart, honey, she tried to tell you.
I told you I was no good. I've never been much good.
She ain't the type that makes a happy home.
He just can't quit Lori. Their attraction to each other is rooted in a shared love of danger and excitement, and their crimes are a way of indulging this desire. But a love like that cannot last. It's too hot, so it's got to burn itself out. Bart becomes increasingly disturbed by their actions. Bart could never kill anyone. Lori, on the other hand, she does what she wants. She can get caught up in the moment, and then she has no self-control, and that's for killing.
Like that guy you killed in St. Louis?
I told you I was no good.
The chemistry between John Dahl and Peggy Cummins is electric, and it's palpable. Dahl is extremely charming, sensitive, and attractive in the role of Bart, and his quiet thoughtfulness is a perfect counter to Cummins' wild, mad, crazy energy.
Nobody dare shoot if we take the baby with us.
Give him to me.
But he'd be safe. They wouldn't dare.
They both give compelling and very modern performances that keeps the film from feeling dated. Well, as is usually the case with the films discussed on this channel, not many people saw Gun Crazy when it was first released under the god-awful title, Deadly is the Female. It's the only film made by the King brothers to lose money, but it's also their masterpiece. And even though American audiences dismiss Gun Crazy, the film's visual style and use of handheld cameras, long takes, and location shooting had an impact on French directors like François Truffaut and Jean-Luc Godard, and later the French New Wave movement that emerged in the late 1950s and early 1960s. 1967's Bonnie and Clyde also owes a great debt to Gun Crazy.
We rob banks.
Truffaut and Godard showed Gun Crazy to Bonnie and Clyde director Arthur Penn. Today, Gun Crazy is widely regarded as one of the most influential films in the film noir genre, yet I still feel like it might be missed or overlooked by the casual viewer. Its innovative camera work, use of sexuality, and the depiction of eroticized violence was both shocking and groundbreaking at the time of its release. You've probably never seen anything like it. It's an exciting, thrilling 80 minutes of viewing that you'll never forget.
Action.
This is Diane Tremaine. Played by Gene Simmons in the 1953 film Angel Face, Diane is different. Diane is not like all the other girls. Directed by Otto Preminger and co-starring Robert Mitchum, Herbert Marshall, and Barbara O'Neill, Angel Face is the story of a troubled young woman with an obsessive love for her father and a burning hatred for her stepmother. Into this dysfunctional family dynamic steps ambulance driver Frank Jessup, played by Robert Mitchum. He arrives on the scene after Diane's stepmother, Catherine, is poisoned by gas. The incident is dismissed as an accident, but we know better.
Someone tried to murder me.
Once Diane lays eyes on Frank, she becomes obsessed with him as well. Frank, who has a perfectly nice, stable, and fine-looking girl, Mary, played by Mona Freeman, waiting for him after work, can't help but be tempted by Diane.
Well, hello. You do get around fast, don't you?
And her flattery, her big eyes, and her sweet face, and her car.
I'll see you tomorrow.
Tomorrow? But I've got everything ready.
See, Frank used to be a race car driver before the war, and he doesn't so much as fall in love with Diane, but in lust with her, and her car, and her big talk about him racing again.
They're running the Pebble Beach road races later on next month. I thought that we could enter the car and you drive.
Frank's not above being an opportunist. Diane gets him a job as the family chauffeur. But throughout all of this, she still violently hates her stepmother. Frank, he's drawn to Diane, but at the same time, he manages to never get sucked into her hate-filled delusions.
If she's trying to kill you, why does she turn on the gas in her own room first?
To make it look as though somebody else were guilty.
Is that what you did?
He even tries to put her off her schemes because he knows what's in the back of her mind.
You hate that woman, and someday you're going to hate her enough to kill her.
But if not anything else, Diane is determined. You see, Diane resolves to solve her stepmother problem once and for all. She rigs the family car to reverse instead of drive. The only thing is, she didn't expect her father to be in the car. Of course, Diane is guilty. She even admits she acted alone. But Frank is arrested as her accomplice because Frank knows all about cars. At the suggestion of Diane's attorney, the two get married so they can't testify against each other and to gain more sympathy from the jury. And the jury turns out to be extremely sympathetic.
The jury in the above entitled action find the defendants not guilty.
But there's no happily ever after. Frank, the big dummy, actually really thinks Mary is going to take him back.
Frank, with you, I'd always be worrying. Because there are a lot of Dianes around. And I want a marriage, not a competition.
When that doesn't happen, he plans to cut out to Mexico. But Diane has other plans.
Let me take you to the bus station.
Diane is such an interesting iteration of a femme fatale. The film's advertising characterized Diane as scheming, psychotic, an angel of death. And the film's posters and ads use the taglines, "And the men she loved, she destroyed." It's definitely sensational, but if you went to the theaters in the fall of 1953 hoping to see Jean Simmons as a sexualized vixen, seducing and murdering her way across the screen, then you would be very disappointed. Diane is anything but hard-boiled. If you put her in a room with Vera from Detour or Vita Pierce or even Irene from Sudden Fear, they'd eat her alive. She's emotionally needy. Like Ellen Barrett from Leave Her to Heaven, she's father-obsessed, and she immediately becomes Frank-obsessed. She can't help herself. She just loves too much. And her love for her father drives her paranoid hatred of her stepmother. But where Diane differs from Ellen and all the others is that she suffers remorse and guilt. In fact, she's so devastated that she has killed her beloved father, she ends up hospitalized.
But I don't want anyone to defend me. I did it all by myself. Not Frank.
She even comes to realize that Catherine wasn't the wicked stepmother she thought she was. Diane wants to confess. She knows she's done an awful thing and she's ready to pay the price for it.
I want to say that it was I, and I alone, who killed my stepmother, Catherine Tremaine, and
Hold on now. Never mind, Miss Preston. Just forget that.
To quote Paroma Chatterjee, writing in Bright Lights Film Journal, Diane Tremaine comes very close to having it all: the house, the money, and the freedom. Kitty Collins, Kathy Moffat, and the rest of the femme fatales would have been exultant. They would have tried to knock some sense into Diane, told her not to mope about and enjoy the jackpot. Also, Diane's motives for murder aren't materialistic. Her concerns and fears are focused inward on her home and family. They are the source of her paranoia and drive her murderous schemes. Angel Face was not alone in observing the dark side of family dynamics and the emotional underbelly of the post-war domestic sphere. The 1950s was full of sordid little crime dramas that exposed a prevalent hypocrisy and undermined the era's idea of conformity. Films like Sudden Fear, where a woman's belief in her outwardly perfect marriage collapses once a murderous plot is uncovered, and Pitfall,
Your breakfast is on the table, darling.
Where else would it be?
where the trap of mundane suburban family life opens the door to infidelity and murder. Then there's films like No Man of Her Own, where a twist of fate allows one woman to find safety, security, and love, only to have to fight to keep her past hidden in order to secure a happy family. The Tremaine's family dysfunction is just another manifestation of the social unease many felt with the stifling nature of the era.
Evening, family.
Jean Simmons is an interesting study in a career that was really never able to flourish under the studio system. She first garnered attention at the age of 15 when she played Estella in David Lean's Great Expectations.
Why don't you cry again, you little wretch?
She'd been cast to acclaim in some of the country's most prestigious post-war films, including Powell and Pressburger's Black Narcissus and Laurence Olivier's Hamlet. While Simmons was gracing the screen in Britain, in Hollywood, Howard Hughes saw her picture, and he developed a, shall we say, fixation on Jean, similar to the destructive fixations he would have on Jane Greer, which essentially killed Greer's career in its prime. Hughes had seen Greer in a Life magazine photo spread when she was 18 and put her under personal contract. She was able to avoid his clutches by getting married, and was able to secure herself a new contract at RKO Studios. Unfortunately, in 1948, Howard Hughes purchased RKO Studios.
3 days after assuming control of the studio, he sent for me. And I hadn't seen him for years. And now I'm married, happily married, I have a child and so forth. And he as much as said, "No, you're not happy." I said, "Yes, I am, Howard, I'm very happy." "Well, as long as I own the studio, you won't work." And I said, "It will put an end to my career." He said, "Yes, I guess it will."
Hughes was of the mind that if he owned the contract, he owned the woman, and he had the power to make or break anyone's career. It was in this environment that Simmons found herself.
I came over to get married to Stuart Granger, and I woke up one morning and I suddenly found that I had been sold by J. Arthur Rank to Howard Hughes.
Eventually, Jean sued to get out of the contract, but she had to make 3 more pictures for RKO.
The movies that I did do at RKO, practically put my career in the toilet.
Hughes then went over to 20th Century Fox and asked for one of the most notoriously difficult, demanding, and cruel directors to helm Angel Face, Otto Preminger. Preminger was known to give young actresses a very hard time, and his reputation was not one of being sympathetic, kind, or patient. And in exchange for giving Preminger full artistic control over the film, Preminger would follow Hughes's explicit instructions to make Jean's life hell.
Usually a director wants to encourage you and make you feel, secure. But he absolutely, totally destroyed me.
And even though the film was shot in only 18 days, it was probably the longest 18 days in Jean Simmons' life.
There was a scene that Robert had to hit me. Otto insisted that he really hit me. Every time he tried to pull the punch, Otto would say, "Do it again, hit her."
Mitch said, "Once more, good." Bam!
But the final product, the finished film, is actually rather beautiful, with cinematography by Harry Stradling and a haunting, melancholic score by Dmitri Tiomkin. It gives us one of Jean Simmons' best screen performances. And after all that, Angel Face was a box office failure. So, about that ride.
Let me take you to the bus station.
I've already called a taxi.
Just this one last chance.
Frank takes that ride from Diane to the bus station. And he makes his last bad decision. Diane Tremaine, with her beautiful mask of a face that belies a hidden manipulator and murderous intent, is a perfect representation of an era that presented a very glossy, well-put-together facade that papered over all the discomfort, disquiet, and abuse that would bubble up and erupt into the violence and protest of the 1960s. Jean Simmons, despite the institutional abuses of Howard Hughes and Otto Preminger, persevered. She, under the circumstances, strain, and pressure of the making of this film, managed to create a complex and dynamic character, whose arc has a unique place within the world of femme noir femme fatales.
I wouldn't know what to do with my life without you.
Okay, so I watched Blonde all the way back in October, and I hated it. It was unrelentingly painful to watch. More than anything else, I think it was a disservice to Marilyn. You could tell the filmmaker, writer and director Andrew Dominik didn't particularly care for Marilyn. Dominik, who is on the record saying, and I quote, "Marilyn Monroe, she's somebody who's become this huge central thing in a whole load of movies that nobody watches, right? Does anyone watch Marilyn Monroe movies? Like, my dude, you spent 10 years trying to make this film and you don't even like her?" And I've been sitting with this for a while, and I kept coming back to another tragic blonde, Laura Palmer. Laura Palmer is a character from the TV show Twin Peaks.
Tell me some other things about her.
She's in high school. She's using drugs. She's crying out for help.
The show follows the investigation into Laura's death, as well as the complex web of relationships and secrets that are uncovered in the small town of Twin Peaks. Laura is depicted as a popular and charismatic student, but also as a troubled individual whose experiences of pain and trauma in her personal life and her death have a profound impact.
There'll be an announcement from the principal.
And the mystery of who killed her was a cultural phenomenon.
For the better part of 2 television seasons, Twin Peaks and the travails of Laura Palmer intrigued American viewers.
When Twin Peaks was canceled in 1992, director and show creator David Lynch, who had always intended to revisit Laura Palmer's world in movie form, began crafting a story that explored the last days of her life. He said, "I always loved Laura Palmer, and in the series she's dead, so I love the idea of seeing the last week of her life." And that exploration of the last week of her life became the film Twin Peaks: Fire Walk With Me. Before the film even begins, we know Laura is dead, murdered, her body found wrapped in plastic on the riverbank. In fact, we've only known her as dead. Throughout the initial run of the show's 30 episodes, we only saw Laura the way others saw her and remembered her. Laura is a ghost that haunts everyone in Twin Peaks, and her death is the thing that unravels the community and exposes a dark underbelly. Fire Walk With Me is Laura's story, and it's told with compassion and nuance. And when tackling a story of a fragile young woman dealing with emotional trauma coupled with abuse and addiction, those are definitely 2 components you don't want missing. To quote Collider, Lynch was able to create a disturbing analysis of trauma, guilt, and suffering as Laura's torment is shown in death. Fire Walk With Me isn't just an investigation into who was responsible for Laura's death. It analyzes the true nature of evil itself. The film gives Laura a voice. Her life and experiences are no longer filtered through the love, hate, admiration, revulsion, and lust of those who knew her. Cheryl Lee recalled, "It was almost like I could feel her spirit or life force having more to say. When David started talking to me about the possibility of the film, it felt necessary for her to be able to have a voice." Like Blonde, Fire Walk With Me is a difficult watch. There's a lot of unsettling, uncomfortable imagery and themes. There's the worst kind of abuse. There's secrets, lies, assault, dysfunction, brutal family dynamics. The film is surreal, but it's also sympathetic and emotional. It illuminates elements of a story that we've already seen and opens mysteries to stories that are yet to be told. But overall, it's Laura's mystery.
Who are you really?
She, over the course of those last 7 days, feels a compounding and approaching doom.
When this kind of fire starts, it is very hard to put out.
One of the more important things the film does is it provides a deeper exploration of the relationship between Laura and her best friend, Donna Hayward. Maura Kelly, who replaces Laura Flynn Boyle, infuses her portrayal of Donna with a stubborn gentleness.
I do love you, Laura.
She knows something is wrong and she is unable to help. And Laura, because she loves Donna, tries to protect her. Cheryl Lee in the role of Laura is devastating. Her emotions make pendulum swings that can happen on the turn of a dime. She's not always kind and at times can be vicious.
Get lost, Bobby.
Oh, yeah?
What about this, James?
She's a teenage schoolgirl in her plaid pleated skirts and mock-neck sweaters, delivering meals on wheels, but she's also scared, tormented, and traumatized. And she uses drugs and sex as an escape. She's two people, light and dark.
You don't even know me.
She's aware that her destruction is inevitable, and it's the way that she faces that is heartbreaking. Marilyn was a real person, a person who was exploited by the men around her and her industry, but her life was not devoid of joy, it was not devoid of friendships, and she was not devoid of agency. Laura Palmer is a fictional character, but David Lynch loves Laura Palmer. Although she arrived on our TV screens as a discarded body on a beach wrapped in plastic, David Lynch gave Laura her voice and her agency, and a story that builds out life beyond her suffering and her trauma and her tragic end. When you watch Fire Walk with Me, even though we know how her story ends, it still packs a deep emotional punch because we still think she can find a way out of it. Like David Lynch, I love Laura Palmer.
And the angels wouldn't help you. Because they've all gone away.
About 5 minutes into the film, The Last Seduction, Bill Pullman's Clay Gregory slaps his wife, Bridget.
You're an idiot.
Hey!
He's pulled off a scheme where he's stolen and sold $700,000 worth of pharmaceutical-grade cocaine, and that slap comes after the stress of the handoff. The plan was Bridget's idea.
You are a criminal mastermind.
Just a hobby.
Now, Clay apologizes for the slap,
Legit. I didn't mean
but that seemingly out-of-the-blue act of violence does not go unanswered. In a spontaneous act of retaliation, Bridget takes that cash and she runs.
You better run!
Bridget Gregory, played by Linda Fiorentino, is hands down film noir, neo-noir, any noir's ultimate femme fatale. She seduces, she manipulates, she double-crosses, and she murders. Directed by John Dahl, 1994's The Last Seduction is a neo-noir thriller that follows Bridget Gregory and that $700,000 in cash as she goes on the run and into hiding. Bridget starts a new life in a small New York town. She gets herself a new job.
I can't believe our good fortune. The fellow we were about to go with wasn't half as qualified.
A cover story.
No one else in the company will know you as Bridget Gregory, so there's no way your husband can find you. He actually beat you.
Savagely.
A new name.
Wendy Croy.
Good.
With a K.
And a new boy toy.
You have your own place? Do you have indoor plumbing? No names. Meet me outside.
That boy toy is Mike, played by Peter Berg. And he has the sad misfortune of falling completely in love with Bridget. She notices that infatuation, and she reels him in, and she keeps him in line with a lot of sex. And although at times she is indifferent and even cruel to him, he can't stay away from her. And she absolutely uses that emotional push and pull to her advantage. And her sexuality is the primary weapon in her arsenal. It's by no means her only weapon, because this dame is brilliant.
She is one hard-boiled dame.
Mike, I feel like, maybe I could love you. Will that do?
Wow, this is one of the most uncompromisingly tough, sadistic, and smart women in the movie since Barbara Stanwyck made Double Indemnity 50 years ago.
The 1980s and early 1990s marked a period in cinema where there was a notable increase in the portrayal of women with aggressive sexuality. Films like Fatal Attraction, Body Double, Body Heat, and Basic Instinct, along with The Last Seduction, exemplified this trend. These films often explore complex female characters who use their sexuality as a weapon or as a means to assert control over men. The women can have it all feminism of the 1980s is channeled and outrageously transformed through characters like Bridget. These characters want it all, but the all is not the career and the family and the happy relationship. Bye! The all is the money, the sex, and the freedom. These women are not passive objects of desire. These women are active agents in seeking their own pleasure and shaping their own future. For Bridget, there's no expectation that she's going to come out of this having a happy ending with Mike. So where out of the past, Kathy Moffat, another noir MVP, at the end really believes that she can run away with Jeff and recapture the magic of their love in Mexico, the only thing Bridget loves is that $700,000 in cold, hard cash. Meanwhile, back in New York City, her husband, the hapless Clay Gregory, he sends a private investigator, played by Bill Nunn, to go get her and to get that money. One of the most striking aspects of Bridget's character is her absolute autonomy. She's not a pawn in someone else's game. She's the only one moving the pieces on the chessboard, and she's always 3 steps ahead of everyone else.
You want to live bigger, but there's nothing you'd kill for. There's a place for people like that.
She manages to deal with Clay's private investigator. She expertly manipulates Mike's emotions. She discovers the truth of his deepest, darkest secret.
Well, it happened when I lived in Buffalo.
And then she uses that information to control him like a puppet on a string.
Fine. Okay, who? Who do you want me to erase? Who do you want me to kill?
Oh, Mike, he's such a chump. And in some ways, you can see Bridget as a spiritual successor to Kathy Moffat. Because like Kathy, she can improvise and adjust and recalibrate her plans according to whatever situation arises. But whereas Kathy...
You're like a leaf that the wind blows from one gutter to another. Can't help anything you do.
Bridget, she's working towards a goal. Whatever deviations and improvisations she has to make, she still returns to plan A, which is keep the money and get rid of Clay.
Guess who, Clay?
Hello. Christ, you're dangerous.
Did you like being scary on the screen?
Oh, yeah, it's a lot of fun. I mean, and you get paid for it, you get away with it, and if I were to do those things in real life, I would be in jail.
You like this image of tough girl?
It has its moments.
This is Bridget's story told from her perspective, and we see every step she takes to get what she wants. And when all the pieces of her various manipulations, lies, and schemes fall into place...
Wendy, I really thought you loved me.
I never said that.
Bridget sets a devious and ingenious plan into motion. Bridget, unlike so many of her predecessors, doesn't suffer a tragic downfall. She doesn't even have a redemption arc. She doesn't have a moment of weakness or softness. Nope. And she is never once out of the power position. That lack of vulnerability, that lack of remorse, it's refreshing. When Mike gets wise to what's really going on...
Can't do it, Wendy, I can't do it.
And Bridget has to come in and finish the job and tie up all her loose ends. What she manages to orchestrate through improvisation is chef's kiss pure evil genius. Unlike her sisters in noir, she gets rid of the men, she gets the money, and she gets away with it.
Oh, bitch. What made you do this?
I don't know. You slapped me. I get to slap you back.
Bravo, Bridget, bravo. There are 8 million stories in the cinema cities. This has been one.